Hello and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang and I'm joined as always by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush, another championship Sunday. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, yeah. I sound perhaps a little more hoarse and gruff than I usually do. I was out volunteering at the Fringe Festival bar last night, and things got a little loud as I was attempting to yell over the sound of a large brass band that was playing to take drinks orders and things, but it was good fun. And our listeners will just have to listen to me sounding like I smoked 20 a day for the last 10 years for one episode.
You've got gravitas, so you sound like you've taught a few seminars in your day with this voice. Were you the bartender?
I was the bartender, yeah.
Wow. How was that experience?
It was great, yeah. I think I so often miss like manual blue collar work sometimes, given the line of work that I'm in, where I spend so long staring at a screen and speak in abstract terms, that actually getting to have direct connection to my work was quite nice. I enjoyed it.
Love that. The less time spent talking about National Football League action, the better. But I also will say that I'm glad we had the US Open as a distraction from the NFL coming back on Sundays, because I stayed away and stuck to the action in New York, hoping for a bit of an epic, a bit of a long one, even an American win, which even as a Taylor Fritz day oneer, Simon, I still don't back the Yankee Doodle Dandy with all my heart most of the time. But I was hoping for a bit more of something on Sunday. That being said, is there something to be said that both finals were kind of similar? Like, we got glimpses maybe at the end of what Fritz and JPEG could do. And by golly, they're very good players. But there's levels to this, and there's a reason why Sabalenka and Sinner are a cut above. And there's a reason why we're ending the season how we started it.
I think that's probably true, yeah. I think levels is the description that I had in my head watching both of these finals, which is ultimately, I don't think anyone, maybe that's not true. I was going to say maybe not anyone believed for a minute that either of the American players could win these finals during the course of it. But there was a moment, I think, that JPEG was in a position where during that second set, she was competitive. The crowd was behind her. You could see Sabalenka was starting to go a little awry. Fritz kind of had that as well in the third set. So yeah, nice mirror imagery in some capacity. I must admit, through watching both of these finals, I never thought that either of the US players stood a chance. I just thought both of the players they were playing were considerably head and shoulders above them. And I think, unfortunately for the US, it ended up that way.
Yeah, I felt a bit sad for the players in a way, because you could really sense the crowd was desperate for them to find something, find some momentum, keep them there a bit longer, make those tickets maybe worth a bit more, but it simply wasn't there. Let's start with the women's final then, Simon, and talk about Aryna Sabalenka digging deep in front of a very partisan crowd. You know, when you get those crowds when they're cheering faults, it's gonna be a bit spicy and uncomfortable at times. And I think Aryna Sabalenka gave some openings to JPEG and co. I don't think she was her imperious best, but in the big moments, she clearly was the better player on this day. And in the big moments throughout the last few weeks, she has been that way. The forehand ferocity, it's just a ridiculous shot. And I think you must have seen by now the radar gun measurements that she had the fastest forehand of any player over the last couple of weeks at the US Open. But I feel like that shot itself needs its own 30 for 30, Simon, because it's just an absolute gun. And I had such a time watching that shot pummel people to various degrees over the last couple of weeks.
It was really fun watching it, wasn't it? I think she served incredibly well during this tournament, especially during this final. I think the moments that she got into trouble is when some of the old problems came back to sort of haunt her, just being a little too erratic and first serve going awry. But my goodness, we said this during her during her Australian Open win, and I think it speaks especially true here as well, which is that so much credit needs to be paid to her and to her camp for the improvement in her mental game and also that stability that's been brought to her serve as well. We are so close to, I think we forget sometimes how not far away and how little removed we are from her suffering from serving yips and completely falling apart and getting into the territory of double faults on almost every single serve. To go from that to her being a two-time Grand Slam champion and in the big moments, her serve really looking imperious, not being, not being scared of the moment that she found herself in and really attacking first serves and big points. She's a worthy winner of this tournament. I think she's, truth be told, the worthy world number one on the women's side. I think it's a discussion that we can get onto in a moment, just the way that this season's going to end and the tournaments that are coming up to see who's going to end with that year-end ranking. To me, she's been the best player on tour. I know she's had an up and down season with injuries and the tournaments that she's played. But when she's at her best and she's hit the heights that she has, I don't think there's anyone on the women's tour that could compete with her.
For her 100th career major match, it serves as an excellent place to stand and maybe look back at how far she has come, because you're definitely right, Bush. Like last year, she was leading Coco, of course, could not close that. She lost in the semis the 2 years before that. And to go from that to seemingly feeling automatic at times, which, yeah, time is something crazy, because, yeah, it did not feel like something possible not long ago, but tennis is kind of really, really cool for that, because you get to see these evolutions happen really quickly.
I think there's many things that we can make, and I think a lot of people are going to circle in on the final and maybe even the semi-final just to go through Navarro and Pegula the way that she did and have to run the US gauntlet in using those two players. But her quarterfinal win over Qiwen Zheng was a demolition job against a very, I mean, what can we say, right? Like someone who'd performed so well at the Olympic Games, someone who I think a lot of people expected big things off on this surface to run deep, and it wasn't even a match. It wasn't even close at any point, and I think that is the definition of how good Aryna Sabalenka has been on a hard court this season, because that was a demolition job.
She finishes 18-1 in the majors. She's tied with Jasmine Paolini for most major wins among women this year. In the final, Simon down 5-3 in the second set. She won 16 of the match's final 23 points. You could hear and feel the air kind of deflate amongst the crowd as it felt sort of inevitable that Sabalenka wasn't going to let JPEG fight back in that second set and take it to a third. She was the better player in the longer points, winning 12 of 15 rallies that lasted 9 shots or more. But you talked about the hardcourt dominance, Simon. 43rd match win in a hardcourt major since 2021, most by any man or women over that span. So this is someone cementing their dominance. I think if you were a betting person, you probably felt comfortable backing Sabalenka going into Saturday. And then even with some curveballs, like it was raining cats and dogs, it sounded hella weird in the stadium. That was weird. And then everyone in the crowd cheering against you. Like, I mean, your coach has also got a tiger on his head for some reason. Like, a lot of weird stuff happening. She had a moment when I definitely wondered about the old Sabalenka, and the commentators desperately craving it. Chris Everett desperately willing this on. I'm so happy that she didn't get to see that. I'm so happy Sabalenka refused her that joy.
There was definitely some talk it into existence stuff that was going on.
Right?
Whether or not.
Shut up. The level of coaching Everett was trying to do to Pegula was super weird to me, because obviously she can't hear what you're saying. So addressing the person as Jessie repeatedly, as if she's like there beside you, was effed.
I feel like, well, you work in sports media, and I feel like I am, adjacent to it and have worked in it previously. And I definitely sound like an old man on this stuff. But if you're a commentator, do not refer to the players by their first name. Come on. First rule of thumb. Maybe it's the whole BBC stuff that's still burned into my brain.
First name, aka like a nickname, as if like you're her aunt or something. Like it was, I don't know, man. I had to mute it very early, and at times unmuted, but it wasn't worth it.
I was wondering, I was chatting with my partner during this final as we were watching it, and I think one of the phrases that I said during it was, I don't know there's many other players in world tennis where the entirety of the match revolves around the single player, where the opponent really is kind of like secondary to them. And I kind of feel that way with Sabalenka, where it's chaos. Every point is kind of riding on what she is going to do, as opposed to whether or not her opponent is going to, force an issue or that kind of stuff. And I think that's testament to just how she plays. Like, she's going for her shots all the time. You're going to get big serves. You're going to get big mistakes. You're going to get massive winners. You're going to force the issue on every single ball. And I think that makes for really exciting tennis, honestly. I don't know that it's everyone's cup of tea, and I'm not entirely sure that's how you would coach it. And let's be honest, you have to be an incredible physical specimen to be able to do that, and also have the mentality to do that as well. But it makes for so exciting tennis to have one player that just goes for everything constantly. We need more of this in the game.
Well said. She also had one of the few kits that wasn't awful as well at the US Open. So I would like to thank her for that.
I like the shoelaces. I thought they were really nice. A nice touch to match the dress.
And the power of the doppelganger. That young girl should also take credit for winning the US Open, because she definitely helped.
Should we touch on, despite robbing her for a moment of her coach wearing the XXXY hat, to touch on some, deeply problematic, disturbing politics and rise of that kind of movement in the world? It's not great to see. There's no smoke without fire. Like, it's very blatantly on display in terms of what some of the coaching staff have been wearing during the course of the 2 weeks. It's not just a bad look. It's just, terrible. It has to be said.
Can I also say on that note, the coaches wearing Velcroable sponsor patches that look like they were glued on the morning before. It's so gauche. Like, what are we doing here? Really?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is our first full year of now on-court coaching taking place, and you've seen a steady rise in the quantity of patches and, just like literal camera time for these coaches, in a way that like they're almost on screen at the end of every point, or between every service game, or even during points sometimes, like if they're really cutting to it aggressively. Which is wild to think about from where we were 2 years ago.
It kind of sucks, eh? I don't like it that much.
I think in an individual sport, you get into a scenario where you ask the question of how much is the coach responsible for what they're doing. And I think maybe let's just chalk this up for tennis coverage and TV coverage, just desperately in search of something interesting and storylines to go on during the course of a match. And I think you're going to find the most drama of the relationship between the player and the coach, because they're constantly in dialogue. You're also hearing much more of it being picked up on microphones now as well, and trying to read into what's going on. I thought that was interesting. I mean, we have got it a lot during the course of the year, and even at the back end of last year, the last US Open. But I still, as someone who, comes from the era where on-court coaching was banned, the idea of having ESPN have the hot mic up to all of these coaches so you can hear just about everything of what's going on and being said, I still find very jarring.
Well, I mean, was it Draper's coach? I think you could see him like using the iPad or whatever was in his box, like in real time, and then talking to Draper and discussing like real time tactics. Yeah, it's fascinating to see how far we've come in that regard, and I understand why the coaches are doing this in the sense of Velcroing companies to themselves, because every dollar counts, and the costs of this traveling circus are many, and it's not the player footing the bill. Sometimes it's people paying their own way. So I get it, but also holy cow, like it's something else. But I mean, that's kind of what the US Open is. Like, I feel like I've commented before on this about this tournament, and like how it is like kind of a celebration of capitalism in some ways. And like that is heavily intertwined with tennis, but maybe that's a conversation for a different episode. Do you have anything else on the women's side? We'll talk about Iga and parting shots, Bush, if you want to save the who is the number one talk for then.
Oh, God, yeah. Just a shout out to Karolina Muchova. A great 2 weeks for her. It's good to see her back. Good to see her playing well. And she had her chances in that semi-final. I think she's going to look back at that second set and where she was in the match and could have thought what could have been. But a great 2 weeks for her. I think she's going to win a slam. I think. one day.
Really?
She has the game for it.
Yeah.
She has everything going for her. It's just, can she finally break through?
But there's always one unforeseen thing that happens. I feel like that derails everything. Unfortunately, she's a hell of a player.
That's it, though. Good tournament for the women's side. And overall, a worthy winner, despite all of the things I said about the dodginess of her camp and coaches around her. She's full mark. She deserves this. She deserves this tournament. She deserved the Australian Open. She's been the best hardcourt player all year. Absolutely hats off to her. Fully well deserved.
On the men's side, Jannik Sinner won the Australian Open. He's won the US Open, something that a few have done before him. Bush, I think it was 3 players. Mats Wilander did it once, and then Novak and Roger each did it 3 times. But it's still very rare, and I think it's a testament to how good you've got to be, how consistent you have to be to win both slams in the same year. Jannik Sinner has been that person. I think we talked about this in the Discord, but he has the lowest floor in the sense that his normal game is good enough to beat most players because he's just so damn rock solid. And he was that over the last 2 weeks, Bush, to win his second slam, dispatching a relatively game Taylor Fritz. I mean, I think you could tell Fritz was, I never thought he really had a huge chance in this match, but the way the first set ended felt kind of like a death knell.
Yeah, this was a final which was perhaps not for the celebrities in the house. It has to be said from the perspective of whether or not you find this tennis enjoyable.
To who? The whole Taylor Swift and Mahomes were there?
Yeah, I think Mahomes was there with his wife. I think my understanding, I don't know, but the loose understanding that I have is that Mahomes and Kelsey and the respective partners are good friends with each other. So I also realized that's probably the first time anyone's ever referred to Taylor Swift as someone's partner. So
the way you said it,
exactly,
dripping with disdain.
But I think they hang out as, I don't bloody know. I think they hang out as a unit. Or at least they were hanging out in the bar. At least Pat Mahomes was out there watching the game.
Jason Tatum was there, Tracy Austin, Andy Roddick together, which is always great. A lot of stars in attendance, you're right. Desperate to see Tay-Tay.
Yeah, Usher was there, Matthew McConaughey was there, the guy who owns
Henrik
Twitter.
Lundqvist.
Henrik Lundqvist, yeah.
Who's the celebrity that you can name that shouldn't have been there? That wasn't a big enough star, do you think, that you saw?
Tim Henman?
Oh, please,
Andy Roddick?
Please, sir. Please. All right. Well, I am a card-carrying member of the Taylor Fritz fan club since day one. That being said, I think this is probably his ceiling in the sense of slam finalist, Bush. That probably makes sense. Very good player. I mean, excellent win over Tiafoe. He outlasted Francis pretty much, but he also did us the great service of taking out Zverev. And a great match for him. I thought that was an excellent moment for Fritz and also a good match. I think Josh said this on the Discord as well, but Zverev is not usually involved in great matches, but I thought overall that was a good match.
I think Fritz has the unfortunate role here, which is that he's going to need a good draw to win one of these slams because he's going to need to try and get to a final against a player that he matches up well against or manages to get through a bunch of players who can't neutralize him in a certain way. I think he just ran into a player who, unfortunately for what Fritz does, which is incredible. Like he's an incredible server. He is pretty consistent for a guy of his size in the way that he moves, which is not great by sort of a top 20 standard. He's all right. His backhand's pretty solid. He's okay. And obviously his forehand is a huge weapon in terms of what he's going for. The problem is like that doesn't match up well against Jannik Sinner. It doesn't match up well against Carlos Alcaraz. It doesn't match up well against Dani Medvedev. It doesn't really match up very well against Novak Djokovic. So you're sort of running the gambit. You're going to need to not play one of those players in a final, even against someone like, Alex de Minaur, even someone like an Alexander Zverev, who he managed to get the better of here. And I think 4, like you were saying, a good match, but 4 tight sets as well. that's kind of who he should be aiming for. If he can get that as a final, then I think he has a chance to win one of these. But the problem is, like, the players that I mentioned, they're kind of just better than him at everything. And that's going to make it very, very challenging for him to win a slam.
Do you feel the same way about Draper? Jack Draper making a surprise semifinal run here after cheating in Cincinnati? No, I won't let that go. But that was a shock. I mean, he puked his guts out in that semifinal. But the semi against Sinner kind of felt like all the things he does are good, but Sinner does them better.
Yeah, I do. I think they're very similar players, right, in terms of what the floor and what the ceiling is for them as well. So I think that's a good comparison. Sinner's just a night for these big dudes who hit big shots, and the weakness is if you're ever going to trap them in a rally or make them come forward and or make them hit awkward shots, Sinner's just a complete nightmare for both of those dudes. And I think it showed up during this final as well. It was very obvious anytime that Sinner and Fritz were trapped in a backhand-to-backhand rally. You're like, oh, good night. Sorry, Taylor. That's the end of this point for you, yeah.
This is going to end badly for you, sir. Oh, God, yeah. Like I want to do, I watched some of this match. Not all of it. I had it unmuted at times, but I watched some of it muted. And when those long rallies happen, I kind of watch players' movement, not the ball, sometimes just to see how they are moving and where their anticipation lies or how fresh they seem. And I mean, towards the end, how can you fault Fritz for kind of feeling like it's a losing game? Like, and he's not gonna be able to come through it, right? So he goes long or he goes big and he loses the point. So I think this was a great tournament for him. Like I said, I mean, I felt kind of bad for him as well because the Tiafoe match, I mean, everyone felt kind of shocked by how it ended and how Francis kind of went away at the end, Bush. So like that wasn't necessarily the most uplifting scenario, but the way the crowd was backing him today, I was hoping for a third set. But Sinner's that good, and I think a deserved champion here. That being said, the doping stuff. Do you think it was talked about enough? Because it does feel like Priyanka mentioned on the Discord, everyone has moved on very quickly, and they didn't mention it much at all in the final. I know I had it muted at times, but it didn't seem like that was a topic of conversation very much. And to go from a few weeks ago when we were talking about tribunals coming down and, and shady going on to here we are today with like, yep, he's the most consistently great player on the tour and he's right there with Carlos, if not ahead, to be the face of the game. Like to go from DEFCON 1 to here, it's pretty nuts.
I think the end of the season will be fascinating to watch of how things shake out because he has, in PR terms, managed to move the story on, has he not? From the fact that he's won this title, people are going to be talking about this as opposed to the fact that whether or not he is guilty of the charges that were laid before him. I saw Roger Federer was talking about this during the course of the week as well, and I think he did the thing that Roger Federer does, which he came out entirely squarely in the middle of the fence on it. Like the backside is sore from the splinters of how firmly he sat on it.
He's literally Swiss, man.
He is very Swiss, yes, incredibly neutral on it. I am a little shocked as well that we've managed to move the conversation as far forward as we have done. And it's not seemingly not sticking to him. It seems like for all the things that we want to say about the situation of how the tribunal and how the powers that be handled this situation, it's kind of what was the phrasing that we used a couple of weeks ago, that his legal team have played a blinder. I feel like everyone involved here has rallied around to make sure that this is protected, and he seems to have come out of this all right.
Well, he's got the right friends, right? He's got the right people looking out for him in the tennis establishment, including Darren Cahill, who everyone loves, and deservedly so, because he seems like a lovely man, and I get it. But like, if this was someone who wasn't maybe a favorite son of the tennis tour, does it play out the same way? Probably not. And I think what Denis Shapovalov said still is true, that the rules maybe aren't the same for everyone involved. And it kind of played out that way. Like I don't know. I felt like I was ready to not count how I watched him the same anymore. Like I was ready to do that. And how much has really changed from now or from then to now, like I think I've maybe eased up a bit in my criticism of how it went down and whether or not I think he's doping. Like, do I? I don't think so. But also, I don't know. I'm unsure. And now maybe I cast aspersions to a wider net of players. So frankly, like, it's one of those things that will probably change my affection for the sport going forward. And at the time, it didn't feel great to say that, but it played out where I could like feel myself almost not feeling like as impacted by this match, Butch, and I think it's kind of related to that.
Well, to play armchair psychologist and indeed to front and foremost the parasocial relationship here, if you look at the body language of Jannik Sinner upon winning the Australian Open versus winning this US Open title, it is night and day. I clearly do buy 100% that this has had a huge impact on Jannik Sinner because he did not look overly excited to win this match. And I think there's many jokes that you can make about that's how he always looks. He always looks like a robot on court. He doesn't. I think that is actually a little bit of a disservice to him. He is somewhat more emotional than I think people give him credit for. And I think he actually smiles a lot more on court when he is enjoying things. He was not smiling at the conclusion of this match. He was not smiling during the trophy celebration and did not look overall. I think the emotion that looked the most prominent to me was just complete relief. Yeah, that this was done and that he can move on with his life. Maybe we'll cross that bridge later on.
Probably he beat the charges. Like he passed. Yeah.
From a human level, I definitely buy that this has had an impact on him. Now, you can definitely raise the question of whether or not this is self-inflicted and whether it's deserved. That is entirely up to you to make that, to settle that debate. But yeah, absolutely. From watching him, this did not look like a guy who was overly happy to win.
Yeah, he's just such an important person for this sport going forward. And I mean, like you said, the way they handle this, I guess in terms of their perspective, like, well played. Holy cow. For them to get this right, these guys who have not necessarily been masters of execution, it's all frankly a bit stunning and shocking. And here we are, Jannik Sinner, US Open champion. That's it. Okay, we'll talk a few other men's tidbits in parting shots. But Bush, do you have any other general men's thoughts before we take a break?
Pretty spectacular collapse from Francis Tiafoe in that. From the position that he found himself in. Talk about sliding doors moments and wanting things back. Goodness gracious me. For all the money in the world, I thought it was going to be Francis Tiafoe in this final, and then just a spectacular collapse. Absolutely fair play to Taylor Fritz for handling the moment. And also absolutely fair play for Francis Tiafoe for what his comments were afterwards and admitting to feeling the pressure and feeling the nerves to it. Nothing wrong with that. We all feel that, but it's also kind of refreshing to hear someone, an actual professional athlete, say that as well. So, I just wanted to shout that out to say, it's always it's shocking to see a player fall down like that because you think they can, they've dealt with these things enough times that they could find a way through it. But at the same time, wanted to acknowledge that it's nice to hear from a sort of male positivity and the opposite direction of toxicity. It's nice to see someone expressing it in a positive way.
It felt like Francis was the one guy left that could maybe give Sinner a problem in the final. If he could draw on the crowd and produce something just because of his affinity for the court and his fondness for the tournament, it felt like it could be him, but that was tough to watch. It happened so quickly. I feel like the texts I was getting on Friday night were like, what happened? Like, what? I looked away for like 10 minutes. That was shocking. But that's tennis, man. All right. When we come back after the break, we talk about more US Open stuff, Iga Swiatek's tournament, some PTPA stuff, plus 2 challengers remaining coming up next. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast. Simon, the women's tour after these last 2 weeks, shaken up a bit. I kind of foreshadowed we'd be talking about this now, but the state of the tour, I think Iga Swiatek definitely did not have the US Open that we expected I think you were pretty harsh in the Discord regarding your thoughts on her tournament, but her lead is still pretty sizable as the world number one, but she definitely does not feel like the world number one at the moment. Is that fair?
Perhaps that's not fair. I think my criticism within the Discord was more in the scattergun, erratic nature of the way that she lost to Jessica Pegula in that quarterfinal, where I think sometimes we have very high expectations of the world number one, just given the track record and given the performance, and a former champion here and 5-time slam champion. All of these things, to see the manner in which she was so outside the lines in that quarterfinal made me wonder, how often do you see a world number one come into a match and with the expectations on her and just kind of not deliver in that capacity? So I think that's where my criticism was more coming from. I think it's still been a great year for her, and I think she's still, I mean, the ranking doesn't lie, right? The points don't lie, and the fact that she's deserving of the world number one, I think the heights that Sabalenka has reached would probably challenge that to a lot of people, and I think she might overtake her in terms of the way that the number one points schedule rank will shake out for the rest of the season. But it was a very odd match, a very, very odd match, and I think even her comments post-match indicated that maybe we will watch this space and this tournament for her again in the future, because we know how good she is on clay. We feel like very confident that she's going to win every French Open that she walks into. But it's definitely become more of a gamble to figure out what she's going to do in some of these other major tournaments, which is something that I think is quite a bit different than where we were at the back end of last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing to say, like, maybe she's a specialist. I think that's very harsh and unfair, and I know you're not saying that, but I know the haters have been saying that. So this is fodder for them. But I think that's fair. Like, just looking at the rest of the top 10, Simon, after this tournament, Jess Pegula into the top 3 now, which I think is also fair based on merit, just based on how solid she's been over the course of the year. But also Emma Navarro's into the top 10, which also feels worthy. I wanted to quickly talk about the billionaire stuff, Bush. I know we talked a lot about this on the Discord and also privately, but both JPEG and Emma Navarro coming from wealthy families was a topic of discussion, but like kind of in a way that I thought was a bit funny, because it felt like the commentators were also trying to be like, you know what, she's wealthy, or they're wealthy, but they still work their ass off. And like, they're not like those kind of wealthy people. Like, they take the subway, et cetera, et cetera. I felt like some rehabilitation on billionaires during these broadcasts.
Well, I really enjoyed the discussion on Discord. I think it was mostly me just trying to work through my own thoughts on this whole thing about how the nature of supporting wealthy people in sports more broadly, of whether or not it is an attractive proposition for people to support some of these athletes, and what does it say about the individual who is supporting them? What does it say about the more broader sporting community of whether or not they're supported? I think the harshest criticism of this is people basically realizing that, I don't know if harshest, I think maybe just the reality of this is that even hard work is a different kind of hard work when you're rich, Dev. So I don't think that just like these two athletes have, you know, heart and determination and hard graft and all this sort of stuff is a particularly compelling narrative. So everyone works hard to start with. But the thing is that you are able to spend more time with coaches. You're able to stick this out longer. You're able to have the best sports science, the best medicine. All those things are available to you. So hard work does look different when you're a billionaire or the daughter of a billionaire, son of a billionaire, than it does for a regular person. And I strongly suspect the more broad argument is that it's just not that fun of a storyline to have people who are coming from wealthy families reach the final of sporting events, because it feels like sport is this last bastion of what we consider to be purity and meritocracy, where it is people can come from anywhere and win on sporting achievement alone without all the other things behind it. Unfortunately, we just got done with the Olympics, and if you want to check the ranking system there of who were awarded medals, spoilers, it was all the rich countries. So it already exists in different capacities.
Yeah.
But I think we want the illusion, Dev. I think that's the thing here.
Yeah. Lie to me with some grace, at least. Yeah, I think that's right. I think Luke said it really well in the Discord as well, in the sense of like in tennis you can't really hide. Like you have to prove it. You can't bullshit your way into these spots. And I think in that sense, like I respect running towards the graft in JPEG's case. Like I don't know too much about the Emma Navarro history, but it felt like JPEG wanted to quote unquote like make it in a real way, to the point where like they mentioned she travels alone and like she doesn't travel with family. But I also, like to your point, like she travels alone because she can, like, and the sense of like why some other two players are traveling with their seventh cousins or like their entire distant families, because like maybe they have to, or maybe there's a whole different deal going on here. So the advantages are the advantages, and I think the way it was discussed was a bit funny, because it was like the commentators and the broadcasters were apologizing on their behalf, maybe sensing the temperature in the room, which is a good thing.
Well, yes, perhaps. I think it is not a surprise, though, that you have two daughters of billionaires playing tennis. Like, why this sport in particular? Why does it end up being this particular situation? Yeah. Or why do you look around at some of the other locations and say, like, why do you have a billionaire's daughter in equestrian, for example, or in Formula One, if you want any of these other examples of high-profile athletes who come from very, very wealthy families? Follow the money on these things, and I think it probably speaks more to what tennis is than anything else. Are you floating
a favorite hobby horse of yours, the billionaire child band?
That's the policy I'm going for. That's what I secretly really want.
Billionaire child band in athletics. No, in professional sports. I left out the last part.
You know how we've become so accustomed to like neoliberal means testing on the reverse side of it? Yeah. Fuck it. We're going the other way, Dev.
How about that? Have a taste of this, suckers.
We spent the entire Olympics talking about like different genetic power. All right. How do you like this one, folks? You have more than one comma in your earnings for a year. You're not allowed to compete. That's real competitive disadvantage.
Yeah. Right, definitely an interesting conversation. I recommend joining our Discord because we have a bunch of those with smarter people than us. But yeah, I think that was definitely an interesting side plot. The Olympics as well, Simon, in a different way. I think we can't get around the fact that both people who won didn't go. Like I have a hard time moving past that either. It played a huge role in this summer swing.
Well, I think we always knew that, didn't we? I think we knew that just how condensed the schedule was, and perhaps the fact that we're moving between 3 different surfaces within the space of like 9 weeks, I want to say, on the tour. It obviously caught up eventually. So it's not really particularly surprising the way that the summer shook out. All that being said, it is funny though, isn't it, that we ended up with the same US Open and Australian Open champion on the men's and women's side. And on the men's, if you want, I know this is going to be obvious, and I'm going to say it anyway, just so we're all on the same page about it. If you wanted a moment or a line in the sand about a transitional year from where we were historically, I don't think we can do any more than having Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz win all 4 Grand Slams. With
a sprinkle of Novak gold for the old fogies. Yeah, that feels about right. Feels like a good way to end it, or good way to transition also into this funky year end of tennis, which is always clumsy and weird and fun for the tennis sickos among us like ourselves. All right, quickly, Simon, I just wanted to talk about the PTPA. Andy Roddick was talking about it in an interview. I love how careful he was to mention this because he knew the Novak fans would come after him, and they did. They did, definitely. Half of the Indian Twitter population, of course, seizing on this story because that's what Twitter is now, just a bot farm full of half of India. But Vasek Pospisil responding to Andy Roddick saying like, it's listen, like he gets the good intentions, etc. Novak can't do this though as his full-time job, be the PTA head and play tennis. Like there's too much work going into it. What have they done? Show me what they've done. And then Vasek responded on Twitter saying a few of the things that they've done. Now, some of them, I mean, sound very legit. They're all, I think, legit in the sense that I think Vasek is proud of them, and I think that's totally fair. That being said, some of them didn't necessarily seem like huge wins to get like Hilton access at stops in every city, you know, like things like that. So I'm curious where you side on this. It seems like Roddick is right in the sense that Novak can't be the head of both playing and being the figurehead of this PTPA, or as well, Pospisil and co are doing some things, and like they seem to be putting the right people in place so far.
Yeah, see, Reuters wrote an article about this during the course of the week. I saw this being picked up by a bunch of news aggregators, and I was kind of curious of why this particular moment has been an inflection point for this story. Like, obviously, Roddick talking about it is one thing, but I think are we 2 years, 3 years removed from its inception at the US Open? It's been a while. Anyway, this whole story reminded me of the Judge Judy tapping the watch gif, of just like, we kind of want to see a little more. I think the outside public is not seeing perhaps the movement that they wanted to see on this one. And I think also perhaps expectation setting about what is likely to happen from this kind of movement, and whether or not that power struggle that's occurring behind the scenes has been communicated well enough to the more broader tennis public. If I had to guess on this stuff, it seems like it's just locked in I'm trying to think of a better, less kind of like dramatic way of saying a pissing contest behind the scenes of just everyone. What do they say in politics? Factional maneuvering is the terminology that gets used here, where everyone is just kind of backing into their own corners and trying to secure power. Kind of feels that way to me. And in those situations, it's very unlikely you're going to do a whole lot of communication to the outside world. So I have no doubt that things are going on. Watch this space, I would say. Who knows?
That is fair. That hilarious phrase is definitely fair for that. But I think that's interesting. The PDPA has to be well placed when this whole thing is shaken up and the Jeddah Invitational is installed and we get a fifth slam and we get 80 more tournaments or we get a new pseudo tour. Like they have to have some teeth. So I hope they are prepared for that. Let's see. Okay. Anything else, Bush? US Open before 2 challenges remaining?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. What were your overall assessments of this tournament in general, just given we had some new names at the back end of these tournaments, despite who won them? We had some first-time finalists. We had some first-time semi-finalists and quarter-finalists. I think we can perhaps chalk this one up to being a good tournament overall.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think I might say out of the 4 slams, of which I consumed a lot of, I might have watched the most of this tournament. And it's like, I don't think I missed a day at all. And I think the US Open does a lot of things right. I think they have the benefit of the roofs, which is mega helpful, but I also think that they get it in the sense of like what they try to do with who's placed where and who gets proper shine and generally like what people want to see. The presentation, I mean, you take it or leave it. I complain so much about the broadcasting and commentating, but I also love the comforting sounds of certain broadcasters and just the visuals of the sport. So like overall, I think I enjoyed it, but I do wish the presentation was less. Like I didn't need to see Nick Kyrgios that often. I mean, I'm not a Nick Kyrgios fan, but I get what they're trying to do. That being said, like I don't know. He's still on Twitter acting like an idiot and deleting stuff and making offensive comments, and then he's interviewing players in the tunnel, and like I just it doesn't feel good. And I'm not trying to be a Helen Lovejoy about it, but it just felt stupid and forced. and like they have other people to lean on. Like I think Eubanks was fantastic. I think having a current player who wants to talk about the game and also add insight is definitely worth having and a huge plus. But I think there's others than Kyrgios.
I just think he's not good enough to justify all the baggage that comes with him as a broadcaster. Doesn't really add a whole lot. I don't think he's even that big of a draw. I mean, how could he be a draw to, certainly from a women audience perspective, like given someone who has been, allegedly accused of domestic violence on multiple occasions. And then all the stuff during the course of the week, like all the second serve stuff on the Kalinskaya post and all that kind of stuff. It reeks of someone who is incredibly insecure, small time, still acting like a 15-year-old. Just someone who doesn't make for a particularly attractive person, either in real life or on a broadcast. So I would encourage ESPN and other broadcasters to just get rid of this dude. He's not worth it.
I'm curious to see how they go from here with that partnership. But yeah, perhaps they'll double down. That's my guess.
Not to overstate the Kyrgios thing or talk about it too much, but I feel like we knew who Nick Kyrgios was. And then to see this kind of post that happened during the course of the week talking about another person's partner and all that kind of stuff, it really, I think, soured a lot of people to the point of recognizing that this is just someone who is what the correct phrasing is, someone who's just never really grown up, someone who is just like completely and utterly stuck in the headspace of 1990. And it's really kind of, honestly, it's not very good to see. It's kind of disgusting, honestly.
I think if they let 15-year-old me on TSPN, I'd probably wear Arsenal gear too, or like whatever my favorite team was. I don't get why he's wearing Boston Celtics stuff all the time. I find it very, again, not endearing. And I'm the target for this. I find a lot of stuff endearing, Bush, but not this.
Yeah, you got to be a little careful on this side of things to be like, take your fucking hat off on TV. Where it's like, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, right? Like, I don't believe that. Wear whatever hat you want to wear. It's strange to me, though, that it's the suck anyways.
Yeah, I don't go in for the, like, you got to wear a suit on TV. Like, take your hat off, take your hoodie off, take your earring, like any of this. I don't go in for anything because I think it's obviously like coding a bunch of, shitty stuff. But also, don't act like a 15-year-old on Twitter and act professionally during your day job when you're being paid by someone. There are small things here, not to sound like a business shill or anything, but you can tell. Yeah, I think you can tell like that the pair of us still come from broadcast in some capacity, where it's like, there is a slight responsibility that you have here, despite all of the shit that we talk about the media.
Wear an NBA hat. Wear, Rob Lowe's NFL hat. Just wear an NBA hat. Wear an NBA sweater, okay? That's all.
Can we have a slight piece of professionalism and not be a complete and utter twat? Then that would be okay.
Velcro the Celtics logo on, like a sponsor tag. Like you're a coach. Okay. 2 challenges remaining, Simon. What do you got this week?
Yeah, this one. Okay. Just to bring the tone down slightly, and just to during the course of the week, I was going to do like a nice one on the Oasis and Linkin Park story, because I was kind of like, yeah, it's interesting that you have 2 bands reviving and coming back and doing all this sort of stuff. There's probably a through line there, and then I saw all the news about Grenfell and read the report and all that kind of stuff and the reporting about it, and it's just one of those for our international non-UK listeners. This is a horrendous story. It's harrowing. It's the Grenfell Tower fire, which occurred in West London. Still, the families of everyone involved and the survivors looking for justice out of this, failed by literally every single institution in the United Kingdom. Whether that be, main government, local government, the fire service, the tenancy associations, the business associations, the building manager, you name it. Like, you can go down the list and everyone is completely and utterly at fault for this and has made a colossal fuck up. It is a story of immense sadness. It's a story of greed. It's a story of neoliberal capitalism and its destruction of community and whittling down of services and safety nets. It's so awful that it defies belief. It's bad when you have the chairman of the inquiry and the people that are sitting on the board of the inquiry literally in fucking tears as they're reading out the sentencing and the things that have been concluded out of the inquiry. So not to end on a dour note from my perspective, but I think it's important to keep the people who lost their lives and also this story at the front of our brains and in our hearts, because it should never happen again. And the fact that this happened to begin with in the United Kingdom is a complete shocking and stain on the country.
Awesome. Well said, sir. Also, might want to look into who that new Linkin Park lead singer is. I think there's been some new reporting on that, which is not great either.
Scientology's fine, right? I think in 2024 it seems completely fine.
I was like, why is Danny Masterson trending? And I'm like, okay, so it's related to that. Okay, good Lord. No, really well said. I did some reading on it as well after we talked. I was aware of the story, but yeah, holy cow. Definitely follow up on that if you are so inclined. I'm going to go with, I had a few different options. I was going to talk NFL. Like I told you, Simon, I wasn't going to watch today, and I didn't for the most part because we had the final and like I was doing some reading, but I still did watch, and I feel like they got me again, which feels unwell. But I'll shout out TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, friend of mine, helped write one of the films there, Shook, which got excellent reviews, which is great. So shouts to Adnan for doing that. Gonna check it out myself. But yeah, it is still cool that we have this year. It's definitely changed, and I think it's no longer that indie film festival that was able to create runaway hits or runaway trophy winners like this film festival has in the past. It's definitely been corporatized, but it's nice that it's maintained or like it's surviving, because I think the arts in general in the city are having a very tough time. And I know TIFF is one of those places, and by no means is it perfect by evidence of some of the reactions to the protests we've seen so far. But yeah, I enjoy that it's here and that it's happening.
Yeah, it's my turn in 2 weeks for VIF over on my side of the country. So I'm looking forward to watching a bunch of stuff. I was going to ask you before we signed off, what did you make of the Guardian cap wearing in the NFL starting? I saw it referred to as, in a piece that I saw written on the internet, as the equivalent of replacing a Toyota Corolla with a Hummer instead. Like you're just replacing one thing for another, so it's not improving anything. Guardian cap is like it's a squidgy thing that people wear on top of the helmet in the NFL. So it's supposed to be better for brain injuries, but in general, you're still doing the action.
I mean, I've seen some reporting that like it is better, and I mean they should be all wearing it if that's the case. But yeah, I haven't really noticed them stand out. Like I know people are afraid that it would look like big heads, but I've seen some linemen wearing it. It's fine. I mean, at this point, God, like I watched some college game the other day and saw some of the hits that were being delivered. I'm like, oh no, like it's the deal you make. It's the deal with the devil, basically. And I said I wasn't going to watch today, and here I am watching Jim Harbaugh yell at someone. So I think I am part of the problem, as per usual. We will leave it there, though, and let you get back to it. But as always, a reminder, we are on patreon.com/openera. Join us there, get the show ad-free, get it early on Sundays, plus join that great Discord that we mentioned so many times today, because it is great, and during tournaments like this, it shines. So join us at patreon.com/openera. For producer Greg on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time.